Emeka Egbuka, A.J. Brown, and Jaylen Waddle are all top 10 fantasy plays this week. We reveal our full wide receiver fantasy rankings for week 10 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst for the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today is Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Network, and Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Today, we are going to finish up our positional rankings for Week 10. We've already gone through quarterbacks, tight ends, and running backs. So today, we will hit on our wide receiver rankings. We have a lot of big wide receivers on bye this week. So Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, any of the Titans wide receivers if you were playing them, but hopefully not. But so you're going to have to, fill in those spots this week. So we'll help you later on in the show, hopefully try to find those replacements for you. But starting at the top of our rankings, Jackson Smith-Njigba is both of our number ones. He's been on fire. He's unstoppable. I mean, he's just been insane this year. We both have Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown in our top three. I have St. Brown at 2. You have him at 3. And then I have Puka at 3. You have him at 2. Drake London, we both have in our top 5. I have him at 4. You have him at 5. He's been balling out. And then Justin Jefferson rounds out your top 5. You have him at 4. I'm just slightly below her at 6 with him against the Ravens. But one guy I want to hit on first here is Emeka Egbuka. I have him at wide receiver 5 this week. You have him at 10. 3 straight bad weeks for him, that's for sure. But he's been dealing with the hamstring injury that he's playing through. He gets the Patriots, who are middle of the pack against wide receivers. Drake London just went off on them last week. And with this bye, I'm hoping he got to rest up that hamstring a bit. So he's still getting the targets. I think he has a big bounce back week this week.
Yeah, there really is no one else now. Chris Godwin's still iffy. Like every week, we're worried about if he's ever going to come back. And then Mike Evans, we know, is down for the season. We haven't seen Jalen McMillan yet. So it really has been the Emeka Egbuka show out of necessity. I would think Baker Mayfield also gets back on track. He's had some off games of late, and I think that's contributed. They didn't need him too much against the Saints, right? Just a couple weeks ago, they had a defensive touchdown. The Saints really didn't put up a fight. But we know Drake May coming into Tampa is going to put up points. That should increase the passing volume. We'll see about Bucky Irving. I don't think that changes the game plan for the Bucs. I think they still need to be aggressive throwing. I think the same will go on the other side. We've talked about this. So Egbuka targets alone should be very healthy this week to go there. Now, it's interesting because it really, with Drake London, I think it comes down to, hey, he's got Sauce Gardner now all of a sudden in this matchup. Looks like he's going to play for the Colts. So that's interesting, but no reason to slide London down. He's still the go-to guy. And Egbuka, I think, can take advantage of that same matchup London had last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Devontae Adams, you have at number 6. I'm with you there. I have him at 7 against the 49ers. So we like both Puka and Adams to have a good game in that matchup. Now, your number 7 this week is Nico Collins against the Jaguars. I have him at 9. Some people might be a little bit worried about Davis Mills starting at quarterback because CJ Stroud is officially out in concussion protocol. The Jaguars aren't too scary of a defense against the pass, allowing the 12th most points per game to wide receivers. His best game of the season so far, Nico Collins, was against the Jaguars in week 3. He had 11 targets, 8 receptions, 104 yards, and a touchdown in that game. And then when you look at last week, I mean, all of his production really came with Davis Mills. He had 6 of his 7 receptions with Mills, and then 66 of his 75 receiving yards in that game from Mills as well. Was targeted 8 times after he came into the game. So I think he'll be perfectly fine with Davis Mills. Just maybe his ceiling to catch multiple touchdowns isn't there in this game.
Yeah, I think they're also in flux with their other receivers again, right? We had Christian Kirk come back, and he kind of squashed Jalen Noel's rising value there. Jaden Higgins. Again, there's not much else here. Dalton Schultz might be the second most targeted player on this team. But Davis Mills is a limited quarterback, and that can also help Nico Collins, where the targets are going to be insane. It's going to be much like Geno Smith throwing to Brock Bowers, right? Going forward, that could be the situation here with Mills and Collins. I mean, they're going to have to get them going. I think that's the only way they can really win this game. With Mills, they got to get Collins to make some plays, even in some tough coverage, which the Jaguars don't have a lot of right now, right? They traded Tyson Campbell for Greg Newsome. There's not a lot out there that you're scared of with this Jaguars secondary. No Travis Hunter, of course, as well. So I think Nico Collins is fine. Now, the Eagles guys, it's hard, right? Nico Collins, easy because he's the go-to guy, but now you have two guys that are sharing, A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. You had Brown miss the game before the bye. It was a late scratch. It was very frustrating to his fantasy managers. Now you got Brown, Smith. You got the Packers, not the easiest pass defense in the world. They could have a run-heavy game plan. How do you feel about both of those guys this week, Michelle?
Yeah, I really like A.J. Brown. I have him at number 8 against the Packers. You have Brown at 13, so a little bit lower. We're pretty similar on DeVonta Smith. He's my wide receiver 17. He's your 19. I definitely weigh more into A.J. Brown this week against the Packers. Just looking at the wide receivers who have done well against them, it's George Pickens and Jamar Chase have had the biggest games with over 20 fantasy points against them. Those are those deep, fast threats, right? That can catch those contested balls if they need to, can get open deep. So I think that's more A.J. Brown than DeVonta Smith. And we saw, I mean, what was most frustrating about Brown being out last week was he's finally was starting to get on track, right? Putting up the receiving yards, finally catching the touchdown. So I do think as long as he's healthy, he's a really good play this week.
Yeah, and these corners are not all that scary. The biggest thing about the Packers is the pressure up front. And if the Eagles can protect Jalen Hurts to throw deep, he's going to be fine. You've had Carrington, Valentine, and Keyshawn Nixon. These guys stink if you can get the ball downfield and get time for your quarterback. So the running game should be effective here. Hopefully Saquon Barkley will go and have a reasonable workload. But, yeah, it's exciting. Maybe Smith can get going. Maybe it's one of those Smith big play games as well that he can produce. But I have to venture to say that DeVonta Smith is probably the guy ranked between 15th and 20th for basically everybody every week. That's basically where he comes in, and you're hoping for the best. Like if he gets a touchdown, a big play, he's going to exceed those expectations. If he doesn't, he's going to be disappointing. So DeVonta Smith, a hard guy to rank week in, week out because he's so big play dependent. Now, a guy that is not big play dependent, but we both have in the top 10 this week is Jaylen Waddle of the Dolphins. Now, he didn't get traded. We thought he might be traded. The Dolphins decided to only move Jalen Phillips at the deadline. So Waddle's still in Miami, which is, I think, actually good for his fantasy value at this point because him and Devin Achane are the only targets here that we can look at with Tua Tagovailoa. And we can hope that the Bills have a big lead in this one. I know their offense may be a little bit shorthanded. We'll see how James Cook goes. But I want the Bills to take control of this game. So it's a lot of volume for Waddle. And really, the Bills don't have anyone who covers Waddle well. He typically has good games against them. This game is also in Miami. So I think volume-based and talent-based with this matchup, I think Waddle is a very strong play this week.
Yeah, I do too. We both have them top 10. I have them at number 10 exactly. You have them at 9. Like you said, the Bills should be able to put up plenty of points, making Tua have to throw the ball often. Waddle has been very consistent since Tyreek Hill has left, outside of that one bad weather game in Cleveland. So Waddle is just a consistent good play, and he's going to get the targets, and he's going to get the workload. To close out your top 10, you have Cortland Sutton at number 8. I have him at 11, so just a little bit lower down. And then I have Marvin Harrison at number 12 against the Seahawks. You have him at 14. Listen, we get it. Last week it was against the Cowboys, right? So we can just say, okay, he had such a good game because it was against them. But he's getting targeted by Brissett. Brissett starting again. And earlier this year when he faced the Seahawks, he scored 15.6 fantasy points in that game. Had a solid game with 66 yards and a touchdown with 6 receptions. So I think Marvin Harrison Jr. with Brissett and this newfound, let's get him involved in this offense heavily. He's a solid play.
Yeah, that Seahawks game was the turning point, right? He had the drop and the issue, and then the second half he really turned it on, and then he's been pretty productive since then. And I actually think not having Kyler Murray and having Jacoby Brissett, a better, stronger arm, consistent thrower of the ball, I think you've seen the improvements in this offense, and that's why I don't know how severe Kyler Murray's injury really was to land him on IR, but enough where they wanted to play the healthier guy in Brissett, who was, why not, right? He's been playing really well. So that also helps Marvin Harrison Jr. So I love it this week. I'm hoping Marv delivers, but now he's actually starting to live up to expectations. I know his dad called out the Cardinals. So this is what you wanted, right? He's acting like a number one, and he's producing. So, look, Jacoby Brissett, go figure, a former Colt doing it for Marvin Harrison. So a lot of good stuff coming here with our wide receiver 2s and 3s that we need to break down for you. We'll do that here after we hear from a couple of our fine sponsors. All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Mizzen and Main. You know the saying, look good, feel good. The problem is that most dress clothes only check one of those boxes. They look sharp but feel stiff, hot, and high maintenance. That's why there's Mizzen and Main. Mizzen and Main makes classic menswear with performance fabrics, so it's effortless to look sharp and feel comfortable. They actually invented the performance fabric dress shirt more than 10 years ago, and they've perfected it ever since. Really, with the Mizzen Main, you're going to get some stretchy shirts, moisture wicking, wrinkle resistant, machine washable, no ironing, no dry cleaning. So easy maintenance and care there to take care of your nice shirts. And I love that you can go from the office to dinner or even out on the golf course and still feel comfortable all day in Mizzen and Main. It's a feel of athletic wear, but the look of professional menswear. Right now, Mizzen and Main is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmain.com with the promo code Locked On NFL 20. That's Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen, Mizzen, and Main, MAIN.com. Promo code Locked On NFL for 20% off. And if you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen and Main stores in select states. So check it out again. That promo code for MizzenandMain.com is Locked On NFL 20 for 20% off. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. We'll give you the Prize Picks picks of the week for the NFL. On Friday's show, just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates. That's including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks makes it a lot of fun to play, and now you have the new stacks feature, a game changer. You can now pick more on Steph's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. Plus, one of your players leaves early with an injury. The injury reboot saves my lineup from a loss. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, Michelle, time to continue our wide receiver rankings. We're creeping into the wide receiver 2s. That's 13 to 24 in our rankings here as we get there. Now, Garrett Wilson looks like he's trending in the right direction. Got limited practice in early in the week. We know this secondary for the Browns is not as good. On the road, they have Denzel Ward and then Tyson Campbell. We talked about him coming over from the Jaguars. So, again, this is not the easiest spot, but I think it's Garrett Wilson. You have to play him if he returns. And Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, doesn't matter.
And actually, it might be the easiest spot for Garrett Wilson because do you know who is allowing the most points per game to wide receivers when they're playing on the road this season? It is the Cleveland Browns. So this does seem to be a very favorable matchup. And yeah, the game against the Broncos, he did not do well. He had Pat Surtain on him. Fine. He still got 8 targets in that game. He just, there was good coverage. But almost all the games before that this season, he was balling out, catching touchdowns. He caught a touchdown in 4 of the 5 games that he played before that week 6 game. And then also the Browns on the road, just in general, to their opponents are allowing 32.5 points per game. At home, it's 13.5. So when I keep saying over and over and over that the Browns just have 2 completely different defenses, it's just the case. And it's been that way for 3 seasons now. So it's been a long trend that's been going on.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Jets can sometimes play poor offense at home.
Well,
You
yeah.
don't know what we don't know what offense is going to show up for the Jets in any given week, right? We had those wacky games, so they put up a lot of points. I think it was against the Buccaneers. They lost to the Panthers. Then that Cowboys game, going back to week one of the Steelers, or then you have clunkers where they cannot move the ball at all, like the Broncos game, right? So you don't never know which version of the Jets offense will show up, but the bye might help them. The Browns are also coming off a bye, but he's Garrett Wilson, right? He's a guy you cannot bench if he's playing because he's going to get the key targets for his team. And the Jets didn't do anything. Look, don't sell me on A.D. Mitchell and John Mechie. They didn't do anything to get real wide receivers at the deadline. So you got to keep playing them. Another guy you have to keep playing despite last week's shocking disappointment, DK Metcalf, but he's the only game in town. The Steelers, I don't know if Michelle likes this, did not make a move for a wide receiver. So they're stuck with DK Metcalf and a big drop off to Roman Wilson and whoever else is out there. So again, DK Metcalf, how do you feel about this Chargers matchup this week, Michelle?
It looks scary on paper because they've allowed the fifth fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season. However, the wide receivers who have had good games against them, it's Cortland Sutton with 20 points, Deebo Samuel with 20 points, Michael Pittman Jr. with 17.5 points. Those are the top three guys against them this year. That's the type of player that DK Metcalf is, like that big-bodied guy who's not great at separation, but is really good against contested catches, and that's DK Metcalf. And the Chargers are allowing the sixth most yards after catch per reception to wide receivers this season, something also that DK Metcalf can excel at after the catch. So I'm fine with DK Metcalf. I think we both think he'll bounce back. It's not like we have him ranked super high, but I have him at 19. You have him at 16 this week.
Yeah, perhaps we were a little too high on him last week, but again, we also didn't expect the Steelers to have some easy pickings there with not only leading in the game, but forcing 6 turnovers where they didn't have to throw the ball as much. And Aaron Rodgers' air yardage was just ugly in that game as well. And that's never going to help DK Metcalf. So that's something to watch here. But I do think that you're right. I mean, Michael Pittman Jr. and some of these bigger receivers have given the Chargers trouble. Now, let's look at the Chargers side of things in this one. Now, it's a tough one, right? You don't know exactly which Steelers defense is going to show up. Now, again, we've told you about the fourth target creeping in there to be a big factor. We love Oronde Gadsden 2 at tight end. So somebody's going to be left out between Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, and Quentin Johnson. I think this week Keenan Allen might be the guy out. I think that the Steelers in general have been surprisingly better in the slot than other places. I know Allen can play on the outside, but McConkey can't too. So, and Allen was a little slower. So I think I'm feeling it more of a Gadsden McConkey game than a Johnston Allen game, but you never know from week to week. But I think Allen is kind of the guy squashed a little bit by Gadsden.
Yeah, I do have all of them ranked as playable guys. I have Keenan Allen at the top, though, at wide receiver 18. I have McConkey at 20, and then I have Quentin Johnston down at 26. And you have Ladd at 17 as your highest guy, with Quentin Johnston at 21, and then Keenan Allen, your lowest guy among this group, at 29. I think the hardest guy to play this week is Quentin Johnson, just because they moved Jalen Ramsey to safety. I think that was a good move. They might struggle to hit the deep ball. I do think you can play any of these guys, though. The Steelers are allowing the third most points per game to wide receivers. Even last week, where their defense stepped up, they still allow both Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce to have 115 receiving yards apiece. So they're still allowing a lot of yards, even if that were to come in garbage time. But I think all of these Chargers guys are fine with Quentin Johnson being the riskiest because he's so big play, touchdown dependent. But I'm fine with playing Ladd and Keenan this week.
Yeah, you can take your chances for sure. I mean, there's potential for this game to be higher scoring than we think. There's also potential for Justin Herbert to be absolutely on fire and be a very pass-happy attack for the Chargers this week. And if he drops back like 50 times, there's going to be enough targets to go around for all these guys. Now, two guys that are hard to rank, two veterans from time to time. DJ Moore, wide receiver 20 for me. You have Stephon Diggs at wide receiver 21. DJ Moore stayed put with the Bears. I don't know if that was the best move for him with the emergence of Colston Loveland and Rome Odunze needed to be greased here after last week 0. And then Stephon Diggs actually won because they didn't acquire anybody. Jacoby Myers went to Jacksonville. You only have Keyshawn Boutte, who's been hurting, and Demario Douglas after him. So it's hard between Diggs and Moore. Like, I think they're both decent, like 5 for 70 type guys. But to really get the value, they need to score touchdowns, and those don't always come.
Yeah, we are flipped on these guys. You have DJ Moore at wide receiver 20. I have Diggs at wide receiver 21, while I have Moore at wide receiver 29, and you have Diggs at wide receiver 27. My thing with DJ Moore is, yeah, he had a big game last week, but it was a big game because he had a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown. I still also put up a solid enough 72 receiving yards, but it would have been another game under 10 fantasy points in half PPR if he didn't have those 2 wild touchdowns that aren't even, that's not even a receiving touchdown. So you can't count on those. That's why I have him a little bit lower, but the Giants matchup is a nice one. Well, Stephon Diggs, the Bucks matchup on paper again doesn't look easy, but the guys who have done well match Stephon Diggs' talent set. So opposite of what I was saying about the Chargers, the Buccaneers struggle against those technician wide receivers, the ones that are really good at running routes. And it's the best wide receivers in the league, like JSN, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Stephon Diggs isn't at their level anymore, but he is still one of the best route runners that you can, ask for. So they all had really great games against the Buccaneers. I think Stephon Diggs could put together a good game against them as well.
Yeah, I do feel like Diggs might have the higher floor this week, and Moore might have this. Moore is always more of a ceiling play at this rate with the way the Bears' offense is going. But they're playing the Giants. The Giants are definitely beatable. So the matchups overall are pretty good for both of these receivers. So if you need them as wide receiver 2, 3 borderline plays this week, you can definitely go for it.
All right, we are going to finish up our wide receiver rankings with some guys that you can put in your flex or maybe utilize them during the bye weeks or with injuries. We'll get to that right after a quick break. The NFL season is in full swing, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it can be very frustrating. That's why I always use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. You can pull up Game Time right now, and just a couple of taps, you can see amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games as low as $100. And the app is just made super simple to use. You can buy tickets in a matter of minutes or seconds, if that. And then you can see the exact view from your seat before you buy. So you never are, surprised when you arrive. So just download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. LOCKEDON NFL. Terms do apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Vinnie, I need to ask you what we should do with Deebo Samuel. So it was really hard to rank him this week. And I did put him as my wide receiver 23 against the Lions, just behind guys like Tedero McMillan. And I have Michael Pittman Jr. at 15 and Keenan Allen at 18, Metcalf at 19. So a little bit behind those guys, but Deebo Samuel, you have at wide receiver 30 this week. It's so hard with him because he's the main guy there, right? He's like the only guy with the Commanders right now, but he's just not getting it done. 3 straight games with 7 or fewer than 7 fantasy points.
Yeah, that's why there was some speculation whether the Commanders would just move Samuel this week all of a sudden, like, because if they're not using him and they're not going anywhere, and they really are not, if Jane Daniels can't consistently stay on the field with the elbow injury. So now probably have Marcus Mariota, and was a little bit of flash with Mariota with Samuel and Zach Ertz, but I think the problem is they need other receivers to help these guys be efficient. Samuel's not the young prime 49er he once was, right? He can't just separate and get open the way that we know, and he needs an alpha like Terry McLaurin to stretch the field. Right now, it doesn't seem very positive that McLaurin will see the field in week 10, so that stinks, right? I mean, this is just a downward spiral offense. It's just like night and day from last year. And the Lions can be really tough defensively when they get going, right? If they have a lead, they can kind of swarm on you. Like, I think Mariota's in a lot of trouble because I think the Lions are going to come out to a big lead, probably control the ball with the running game, and just absolutely tee off on Mariota. So I really cannot feel great about going anywhere. There's no good place with the Commanders at this spot, and that's just crazy to say when we went into the season looking at this offense, but that's what losing Daniels and McLaurin will do.
Yeah, I do think Deebo Samuel's playable, but I would much rather have him as a flex player, not someone I'm relying on too hard. The Lions are a fine matchup against wide receivers, allowing the 8th most points per game, 3rd most receiving touchdowns allowed to wide receivers too. So if he can get into the end zone, he'll be okay. Now, in that same game, but on the opposite team, we both have Jameson Williams as our wide receiver 24 against the Commanders. Commanders are a really nice matchup for fantasy wide receivers, and they have allowed the most yards after catch to wide receivers this season too. So just get the ball in the Jameson Williams hands and let him do the work. But two of the last 3 weeks have been really nice for Jameson Williams, and then he has a dud in there in between. So the risk. He give you nothing, but you also know the ceiling.
Yeah, in the film room this week, I'm sure looking at the film of what happened to the Commanders with Seattle last week. I mean, John Morton, who gets giddy about throwing downfield, he's going to be like, wow, they just threw the ball downfield at will against the Commanders. And Jameson Williams got going at the right time last week, right? Lines up perfectly. This matchup is really fantastic for Amon-Ra and Williams. I mean, this secondary stinks of the Commanders. They're just not getting the job done. They're kind of duct taping it back there at corner. I don't know how it got that bad, but it is really bad. So I think what you're probably going to see is Jared Goff in this offense be rather aggressive early, right? Make those big plays, just like we saw Seahawks. But this time, the Lions can also run the ball and finish them off. So again, I'm just seeing this has been an atrocious home game here for the Commanders. They'll show some fight, but I just think they're going to be overmatched by the Lions overall.
Now, one guy I'm higher on than you is Chris Olave. He's my wide receiver 25 this week against the Panthers. You have him at wide receiver 32. And then one guy you're higher on as your wide receiver 25 is Juwan Jennings against the Rams. With Chris Olave, it's hard because with Tyler Shook last week, it was not pretty, right? Only 4 targets, 3 receptions, 57 yards. You want to see the targets he was getting with Spencer Rattler. But the Saints trade away Rashid Shaheed. They have to target him like crazy. And the Panthers are a pretty good defense against fantasy wide receivers, but I just think the volume will be there. So that's why I'm willing to put him right at that, wide receiver 3, right at the top there, flex type of area.
Yeah, I'm just worried that Chris Olave will be easy to mark and take out of games now because of how bad the Saints passing game is. And you're right, the quarterback change, I didn't think it was going to favor him as much because, again, you have a guy with a bigger arm and go figure to get rid of the speed receiver when they're trying to evaluate Tyler Shough and poor Shough. I mean, come on. It's all trending toward them replacing him with the first overall pick potentially in the draft. So, again, Shough is just on borrowed time here. He's just filling in a role because Rattler couldn't play all that well. Give him some evaluation mode here, but I think you looked at Juwan Johnson, he suddenly came up alive. I'm afraid you're going to get just a lot of tight end throws. And the Panthers defense is especially tough. We know they pitched a shutout at home. They seem to melt down in a few games, but after last week, I think you got to buy them more as being a little bit more consistent defensively after what they did in Green Bay. So, again, the Saints might be a team where you don't really want to play much this week. So, sorry if you're New Orleans or Washington fan, but it's pretty bleak out there at this point.
Yeah. And then Juwan Jennings, my reason I don't have him really high is he's very, very much touchdown dependent. He's just each of the last 3 games, he has exactly 4 receptions, no more than 45 yards in any of those games. He came down with a touchdown last week. The Rams have only allowed 5 touchdowns of wide receivers this whole season. I'm not excited to start him. I would only be starting him if I was desperate.
Yeah, Jennings seems to have a good history in bigger games and big spots against the Rams, so that couldn't be there. But we know Brock Purdy, he's been limited in practice. They're not going to play him until he's fully healthy, I don't think. So that's going to probably be more Mac Jones in this one. Ricky Pearsall, who knows, with the knee injury, they're optimistic, but cautiously so this week. So Juwan Jennings and George Kittle could end up seeing the key target. So this is also helpful if the Rams come out and kind of attack that 49ers defense, and it creates a situation where Mac Jones is throwing for 300 plus yards again. So if that happens, then I would think Jennings has to have a decent game with Jones in that one. So hoping for a little bit of a shootout there with the NFC West lead potentially on the line, depending on what Seahawks do.
And then quickly to finish up today's show, if I gave you these three options, which one would you want to play? Romeo Doubs against the Eagles, Parker Washington, who is getting all these targets, especially with all the wide receivers now injured with Jacksonville, against the Texans, really tough defense, though, or Jordan Addison against the Ravens, who kind of, has been a ghost with the last couple of weeks, but then especially with J.J. McCarthy last week.
Yeah, I do have some faith in Addison this week to rebound. I think the Ravens can come into Minnesota and probably put up some points. I mean, this defense has struggled of late. I know last week they were better, but they still gave up a lot downfield. If you look at it against Detroit, they just shut down the run. I don't think they're going to do that for a second straight week. That's going to open things up. So therefore, I think Addison's going to get the targets. They're probably going to make sure Justin Jefferson doesn't burn them as much downfield. So I think this is more of an Addison Jefferson game than TJ Hawkinson. I just don't see him doing too much in this one. So again, I think Addison will rebound. I think he's in the best position of all these guys. I think Jacoby Myers is going to cut into Parker Washington a little bit, and that Texans matchup is not great. And I don't know what you're going to get from the Packers from week to week, but Dubs, if you're playing him, you're hoping for a touchdown. He's not come close to recreating that 3 TD game he had against the Cowboys earlier in the season.
Yeah, and what is nice to see that last week he had 10 targets, 7 receptions, 91 yards for Dubs. And I do think with him, with Tucker Kraft out for the year, his targets maybe can be a little bit more consistent. So I go the Romeo Dubs route here out of this group. I think Parker Washington should get the targets, but it is a really, really gross matchup for him. And then Jordan Addison, the Ravens have been playing so much better defense. And with JJ McCarthy, I just think he struggles in this game. So I'm going with Dobbs among this group. And then the other two are options, just lower, a little bit lower for me. But that will be it for today's episode. Thank you all again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen of the day. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Man Roland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back tomorrow getting into our sleepers of the week and then also our DFS plays of the week as well. So do not miss that. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.